a sprawling labyrinth, a population in decay, a city consumed by addiction. The Pale City in Little Nightmares 2 is far from just your average bustling city. This metropolis is alive, even if barely, with people entranced by the signal. It's a living, breathing presence shaping the narrative and the lives of its eyeless inhabitants. Every corner, every shadowed alleyway tells you a little more and pulls you further into this strange transmission. Whether it's the looming skyscraper at its center or the abandoned ruins of its streets, the places in Little Nightmares don't just set the stage. They dictate the tone, challenge our survival, and deepen the mysteries of the already lore-driven nowhere itself. How you doing? I am doing great. Thanks for asking. I am PlanetDrewpiter, and I'm diving deep into everything we know about the Pale City. We'll explore its locations in depth, its hidden symbolism, and the way its environments shape not only the gameplay, but the overall feeling of this mind-controlled world. This video will focus exclusively on Little Nightmares 2, dissecting the visual style, the secrets, and the stories that make this city and its outskirts as memorable as the characters within it. Let's piece together how the Pale City stands as a testament to the eerie and surreal world of the nowhere. But first, like the video, hit the notification button, and subscribe, you know all the things. Also, we have a revamped Discord if you want to talk lore with the community. That link is down below in the description. Thanks. The Black Tower calls, and it will never stop unless you stop it. Are you ready to go back? The Pale City is the rain-soaked, desolate setting for Little Nightmares 2. Perched on the edge of the still, lifeless body of water, the city is a crumbling shell of its former self. Its sagging, leaning buildings tower precariously over narrow, cluttered streets where remnants of long-abandoned lives are scattered like echoes of the past. Clotheslines still hang heavy with pajamas, and fully dressed outfits rest eerily on benches, as though their owners simply vanished into thin air. The city is shrouded in a perpetual, foggy blue haze, a haunting atmosphere that's only broken by the flickering hum of scattered televisions. These TVs are more than background noise. They're conduits for the transmission. A malevolent force that hypnotizes and controls anyone who watches it. It's a force that twists not only the minds of its victims, but even the physical reality of the city itself. Though Mono and Six provide a glimmer of hope in this dark world, every step deeper into the Pale City feels like a step further into a waking nightmare. Although this video is completely about the Pale City, it's ironic that our journey starts just outside of it. We see leaves falling and some branches bare. Maybe it's the start of fall in the nowhere. Does the nowhere have seasons? This area of forest does seem to be quite old though. You see Mono for the first time spat out onto the ground in front of an old console tube TV. We all know the story of Mono and his power, so I won't go into that in this video, but this TV has power. It's turned on and blaring a static channel in the middle of a deep, dark, and foggy forest. Not only that, but there are other TVs littered out in the background of this no man's land. Could it be that some viewers actually came to their senses and abandoned their TV sets here before falling under the transmission spell? Or maybe the hunter has an inherent hate for technology and the televisions. He took them out into his backyard and forgot them there. Mono gets himself up and immediately runs. This is when we start to see definite signs of the hunter. Cages, trash, and traps start filling our screens more and more, almost like a slow introduction to this part of the nowhere and a small reminder that all this used to be wilderness before people showed up here. What we really can't miss is Mono running under what seems to be a set of rope traps. One that was either extremely effective and caught 4 or 5 people, or one that is being used for storage purposes. It has legs and arms sticking out of the leather trap in seemingly random spots, almost like it's a monster in and of itself. Either way, it's gross, stinky, and nothing in the trap is moving anymore, so Mono runs past it. After jumping over a trip line, we see 2 ropes meant to hang these traps. One has fallen down. What's weird about this is I would have guessed these were rabbit traps, but wouldn't they be useless hanging up in the air like that? I'm no hunter, and maybe there's a different kind of trap I don't know of, but every box-like trap I've seen is made for the ground. As Mono creeps on, we're reminded about how old this forest is again. He pushes through some exposed roots and accidentally loosens a massive fallen tree from its landing spot, sending it rolling down towards him. A moment that reminds us that even the surroundings are out to get us. Mono then comes to a hanging rope and uses it to swing across. I think initially you're supposed to identify that as a noose, similar to the way Six found the hanging man so early in the first Little Nightmares, but after swinging across, we actually realize it's a small work area. Or maybe just a weird way to get around not rebuilding this broken bridge. The citizens of the Nowhere do love making things harder for themselves. After climbing up the second broken bridge like a ladder, Mono comes across 4 random shoes next to… what is that? I'm assuming they're trying to tell us it's scat and an animal is around, one that ate the owners of those shoes. And of course, we can't go too long without a little danger. Mono uses one of those shoes to set off another one of the hunter's fatal traps. We see a repetition of these themes for a little while longer, and even a multitude of bear traps that Mono himself has to set off. It actually made me think, is this forest empty because of how much overhunting has happened? The hunter must be pretty good at what he does, even if he is an awful shot. Stick to the traps, buddy. Finally, we come across a large wooden building, the hunter's home, or shack. His yard is littered with traps and cages of all sorts, empty tin cans, and a stew pot from a past meal. I'm not sure if he keeps his door locked because Mono just lets himself in through the window. Now, whether or not this was a happy home at one point, this place is boarded up on the inside. The kitchen Mono crawls into could be considered decorated and stylish in a weird kind of way. I don't know, this house gives off past its prime to me for some reason. Like it used to be somewhat nice, but now it definitely isn't. We find more rotten food on the table inside. I don't know, I'm just glad we don't look further into it. After sneaking through the main floor, Mono rushes down the stairs into the basement of this abandoned home. We see a sewing machine, linens, and fluff all around the room down here. A sure sign someone's a little crafty down here. I wonder what they make. It's bodies. They sew up bodies. They do taxidermy. After grabbing a loose hatchet, Mono runs toward a melancholy noise, a music box playing from behind a door. Again, I won't go into the actual character's choices too much in this video, but the first time Mono meets Six is when he's chopping through a door with an axe. This room that Six is in looks like it's been a long-term prison for her. The marks on the wall, assuming each mark is a day, is at least 5 weeks. Amongst her collection of other drawings, one stands out the most. At first, I thought this was a candle giving off light, and then it clicked. It's the tower sending out the transmission. So how did Six know about the tower at this point? Technically, we don't know exactly where she was right before the game, but I'm assuming it wasn't there. Could it be possible the markings on the wall aren't even Six's? Maybe she, just like Mono, happened to stumble across this cabin in the woods too. I know Very Little Nightmares tells us a bit about Six's origins, but where do you think Six was immediately before this game? The house starts to come alive at this point. We hear bumping and movement above us when we emerge from the basement and head toward the dining room, which has a few guests waiting there for us. A family sits motionless at the dinner table, seemingly right in the middle of their meal. All stitched up, who knows how long they've sat there. The hunter seems to have taken this whole family and preserved them at this moment in time for some reason. Who are these people? Who are they to the hunter? We press on and open up the attic with an oddly long pull cord. Once Mono and Six climb up, we're greeted again by more strange sounds from inside the house and a collection of prosthetics kept in the attic. There's also a mannequin up there, which has an eerie resemblance to one of the ladies, but honestly, none of that is the worst part. They're not in the main light, but as you press deeper into the attic, we find a collection of bodies hanging from the ceiling wrapped in linens, their feet exposed and some of them drooping off the hook that once held them. It's not something you really think about at the time, but man, that's messed up. How long have they been up here? The hunter cannot be going up and down that ladder all the time. As we brave going into the attic even deeper, we find, you guessed it, another taxidermy project. Strange for sure. There's always been an ongoing theme of broken mirrors within Little Nightmares. Perhaps we'll visit that exact spot later on. Now, I will say, I think a lot of the puzzles, especially early on in Little Nightmares 2, are there for the sake of having in-game puzzles, not much to do with the story. For instance, why would the key to the back door of a home be kept all the way up on a hook hanging in an attic? Maybe the hunter has a little paranoia. We exit the house out of the exact back door and into an outhouse area. A little heart is carved out of it, and we see fresh boot tracks as well, set into the mud right outside of a wooden shed. There's been countless traps all around this house, and we find even more in the shed. Let's just say he's well stocked. When we climb through a window in the shed, we land on the other side on top of a huge pile of light gray pelts. Some wrapped up, some hanging from the ceiling, and this is the hunter's skinning shack, it seems. Howdy, I'm Hunter, at the one and only Hunter Skinning Shack with locations in the nowhere and nowhere else. Need some skin? Got it. Need some traps? Got it. Need a whole taxidermied family? Got it. So yeah, we push through a little waste door and fall into the remnants of whatever animals the hunter was skinning. And like a true hunter, he busts through the larger door and starts blasting immediately, with awful aim, I must add. This chase takes us through a wide variety of the land the hunter lives on, and a lot of potential lore is tossed at us quickly. We get a quick nod to one of the most intense Lord of the Rings scenes, even more traps, and a super quick look at the hunter's barn. We're in and out of it super fast, and we emerge in a thick and bubbling swamp. This leads you to one of my favorite details in all of Little Nightmares 2, the tree carving. Sometime long ago in this very same spot, someone carved a heart with an arrow shot through it into this long forgotten dead tree. I am of the belief that it was the hunter himself. Maybe during a time that wasn't so frightful, the hunter lived a normal childhood. Or maybe the nowhere, as a world, reflects the counties, the real world in the Little Nightmares universe. Let me know what you think. Our final stop on the hunter's grounds is a tiny tool shed on the outskirts. Luckily, the hunter keeps guns within arm's reach wherever he is on his property because we find a gun hanging on the wall of that very tool shed. And we get lucky because there's a beach right next to this shed and a loose door halfway in the water. Just like in Titanic, we sit on a door and float. Jack. On this particularly gentle and probably traumatic journey to the actual city, we slowly start seeing buoys and then floating TVs. Just a glimpse into what this city is truly about. And then the camera pans and we see it. The Pale City for the first time. Every building bent and twisted in various directions, but especially over the upcoming beach. It's almost as if the buildings were waiting for us, looming over to get a peek at who was next. You can actually see them bend down in real time if you look in the distance, which is especially strange in my opinion. As they do, you hear booms and cracks far within the city. When we finally land, it's almost too perfect. A single door with a light above it welcomes us coldly inside the first building we see. Right before we hit the actual streets of the city, we walk in this building and catch a glance of a full suit hanging from another TV. This is certainly a callback to our first experience in the nowhere with the hanging man, but another mystery for sure. For a while, we hop in and out of buildings, seeing bits and pieces of the empty streets, And it's immediately apparent there are very few people in this massive city. A true ghost city. We pass through a diner, the seats littered with more clothes, almost as if the owners just disappeared out of them and left them right where they sat. Or maybe they withered away and it's been so long, there's not a speck of the body anywhere. Possibly the TV broadcast can zap them into the transmission. There's a TV collection in the back of this establishment, and we start solving puzzles with the TV's weight to ascend up into the broken stairs this building hides. They lead us to a room with, you guessed it, another TV set, but this one works and gives us our first clue that Mono is connected to these transmissions in some weird way. We see the long, twisted hallway with the eye door at the end of it. Another looming fact is that these eyes have something very significant to do with the Nowhere as a whole. They've been present in every iteration of Little Nightmares. And after the strange connection, we finally stumble across our first main location. A soccer goal with a shredded net, a simple seesaw, and a dark, unwelcoming door. These are a few of the things that we see as we enter the school's grounds, but the one thing we gravitate toward is the makeshift escape rope made out of sheets, similar to the first game. But instead of escaping, we dive right into the madness by climbing up and into the spooky building. Upon climbing in, the first picture we see hanging on the wall is of our lovely teacher, but she looks fairly normal at this point. All the while, we also pass by a smoking trash can, a dead giveaway. The school children have been up to no good. Everything looks quite a bit bigger than for the average kid in the Nowhere. Book bags hanging in the halls, massive bundles of books, hats, etc. And honestly, the more I see these sorts of clues, the more I lean toward the theory that the Nowhere is this nightmarish mirror reflection of the real world. We run past a snazzy picture of the now cut-out barber and into one of the presumably many living quarters for the school kids. The bunk beds loom over the center of the room just as the city's buildings do. They have different kinds of toys littering the floor, but one thing I noticed that could be nothing, but there's a wooden block laying sideways with that mysterious eye. Maybe whatever or whoever that symbol is for helped facilitate this building or supplied the school with toys. After crawling around the vents and under the floorboards for a little while, we start to see the true halls of this school. Lockers and benches litter the hall in barricade style. This place reminds me of like a small-scale war zone the bullies have constructed themselves. Booby traps line the halls too. There's a low-hanging metal ceiling light ready to swing and take someone's ankles out, and even the bullies themselves are ready to push over a locker to trap someone in, which does happen. The more inward we go, it seems to get more and more disastrous, like we had been in the clean area before, and because we continue deeper into the school, it becomes more and more chaotic with these traps and stacked furniture. The school as a whole looks rather sturdy, but even still, holes in doors, locker doors ripped off, and intense wear is everywhere you look. I think an interesting part to note is when we sneak through the classroom full of oversized desks and climb up the bookshelves to retrieve a key, the shelf topples over, but although we narrowly escape the teacher's rubbernecking, she makes no attempt to clean the mess up. Maybe living slovenly is common in the Nowhere. After escaping the teacher, we ride an elevator upstairs and come across a bully all tied up. He wears his normal school clothes, but with a dunce cap propped completely over his head. He's tied close to a chalkboard in the hallway, which seems like a permanent timeout spot. And while normal punishments have included writing a certain sentence over and over, similar to how Bart Simpson is doing in the Simpsons intro, this bully has decided to be a bit more artistic during his timeout. After spending a little time creeping through the vents, the library becomes the next room on our escape docket. And although it's unkempt, it's a rather well-stocked library. Books are in every nook and cranny, and the kids, possibly teachers, have tied them into circular columns with rope for some reason. What's the reason? Seriously, why are they like that? The library within the school sprawls out a bit more. There's the main room with all the hundreds of thousands of books, and then there's a reading area. one that's been boarded up at some point. Books seem to be slung off the shelves, and the room's giant clock is resting on the ground. No doubt resting there after succumbing to the bully's debauchery. The room that follows looks like a library play area. The main feature is a huge chessboard in front of side-by-side shelves. At first glance, it looks like the chess pieces have been destroyed by the bullies too. But thankfully, Mono is a little more insightful and realizes it's a puzzle to gain entry into a secret room. The chess pieces are meant to be in a checkmate position, and we place the pieces in the right squares by switching the heads. And while the secret room is very interesting, the most interesting part about this room is right in front of us. It's a pull-down map of the nowhere, or what we assume is the nowhere. Unless the theory that the nowhere is a reflection of the real world, then it could possibly be the counties. That would make the eye scrawled messily on top of it even more sinister, like they have an eye always on the real world. After unlocking the door into the next area, we know immediately that it's the cafeteria, and it's occupied. Old lunch, broken dishes, and toppled food racks immediately are the focal point of this messy tiled hallway. This looks like it's the back end where the lunch lady would be working, at least where she would be working if she wasn't locked in the freezer by the bullies. She lies on the floor with her bottom half stuck out of a toppled freezer. Maybe she took a tumble before, but it looks like the food cart was pushed right in front of the door. When we decide to journey further past the freezer, we end up in the school's kitchen. Steel tables, broken ovens, and mixing bowls take up most of the space here, but it seems like the food line is stocked, full at least, with rotting cheeses and meats. Nutritious. Once again, this video isn't about the beings in this world or city, but it's hard to talk about the school's cafeteria without mentioning the bullies absolutely wreaking havoc on the entire room. Bent food trays sit on top of chairs, benches, and trash cans all knocked over with these empty-headed bullies climbing on top and over every possible surface in the room. It's like a food fight from your worst nightmares, and thankfully we sneak by, only to end up in the trenches of the hallways. Now, these seem to be the main avenues for the kids to get from class to class, if they were to even go to class. And it's just as crazy here as it was in the cafeteria. The bullies are using this as essentially a recess area. There's even one of them swinging from the lights while two beat up another in the corner. When we squeeze through the classroom door, we find ourselves in what looks like a classic science class lab storage room. We have locked cabinets with jars full of who knows what on the inside that fill this room. And these shelves reach extremely high. You can make out a severed human hand in one jar, maybe a collection of ears in another, but there are just so many, and it reaches all the way to the upper ceiling with no ladder in sight. I guess when you can stretch your neck as far as the teacher can, that's not much of a problem. There's a few pages and notes lying around, and the true focus is on the button-controlled door. We reach the top of the cabinets and shatter a jar with a sizable brain in it, then use that brain to open the door. That's when we finally enter the main lab. It's much of the same things, but with added counter space for the actual sciencing, and everything looks fairly in order. Perhaps this is where the teacher preps her lessons, or where she just lets off stress. As the lab stretches on, we see an anatomical teaching statue, more jars, and some tally marks on the chalkboard, but nothing truly out of the ordinary except for the actual specimens in the jars. And we struggle through more hallways until our next new area, one of the school's bathrooms. Of course, it looks bad. It's basically a public bathroom, but it could definitely be much worse. Toilet paper overflows in one of the stall's toilets, but these students are all porcelain dolls. I guess they don't really have a use for a bathroom. After saving 6, we finally head into the neighboring building, which is the school's music department. We climb into the upper story and see what looks like a backup console piano attached to a rope for moving purposes. A question mark? I don't really know. People in the nowhere just love hanging things. It's such a weird feature about this world. And this area isn't too populated by bullies either, but maybe that changes depending on the day. The giant notice board in this area is covered in extremely long notes. The teacher is probably posting these for the kids to no avail. Notes that are too detailed, specific to certain students, and just for the reason of being overbearing. The piano the teacher is practicing on is, by surprise to no one, a little flat. That room is also just full of covered furniture and paintings. It seems like it's another storage room. This room is actually a final goodbye to the school, but we can be sure of one thing while we're leaving. The vents in this place are absolutely ruined. We squeeze out into the streets of the Pale City once again, but we run into an interesting feature we didn't know about before. There is an enormous fissure going right through the city. As we cross the makeshift bridge, our vision, at first, seems to distort. When you look closer though, this is just an optical illusion of the building's layerings. I do believe this is one of the many places that the transmission has a focus on. On either side of the fissure, the buildings bend inward. The transmission has distorted this particular place so much that it was able to split the city. Imagine what it can do to a mind. On top of that, we find Six's raincoat here. This might be a video by itself, but Six has been cold this entire journey thus far, holding her arms close to her. I think the fact that the first article of clothing that she comes across is a yellow raincoat is pretty interesting. If you played very Little Nightmares, you'll know that a yellow raincoat was worn by someone who saved Six. So Six finding that exact type of raincoat is even more important. Maybe the Pale City has a way of transporting items meant for others. It delivers messages and hints about who that person is or will become. We catch a short glimpse of a small clothing storefront and some dingy back alleyways before we climb through a glowing open window. A window leading into the hospital. Immediately off-putting, the hospital reveals itself through a dark hallway with what looks like cloth, sheets, and other shelf-stable medical supplies lining the walls. Pushing further in, we see some dirty twin-sized beds blocking the hallway, and then a second hallway leading to a secure wing of this particular hospital. Maybe this is more of a mental institution. Either way, we do see the silhouettes of a person sitting, motionless, in a wheelchair a fair bit down the hall. After pushing open a set of double doors, we come into a room that is completely unexpected. A wide chasm has split this building, similar to one we saw earlier, I think. It does look like a pretty clean break, but it looks like someone has used their handiwork to secure some kind of way across and up it. I mean, hey, what else would be more reassuring than metal beds tied to each other using questionable rope dangling in the middle of this fissure? For some reason, I think this building has the most wear and tear. Like when we jump into the elevator shaft, the elevator inside starts to seriously give away underneath these two small children. Maybe children have more mass in the nowhere though. The elevator finally breaks at the last moment and falls an eerie amount of time before, we think, we hear a final explosive smash in the far, far distance. The first real area of the hospital that we find ourselves in is a patient's room, also separated from the rest of the room by a metal cage door. One of the coolest things about Little Nightmares is when you're playing it, you're never actively thinking about the location that you're really in, because while you're playing it, you're just trying to survive. But this hospital has started to seem more like an asylum. The next room is a large hall of hospital beds separated by curtains, kind of like something you'd see in a war zone, and maybe this place's emergency room. We make it out of there and into an extremely drab waiting room. It comes equipped with an old-fashioned roll of tickets to take a waiting number and a boxed-in metal office for the receptionist and/or nurse. We press a button and a thick metal electric-powered door cranks open. We enter a sort of living quarters, the central TV blaring a headache-inducing transmission. This room, full of wheelchairs, a notice board, and our first glimpse at the patients, these will be a prominent feature all throughout the hospital because the patients are practically part of the scenery here. The patients cannot live with their lives. They look in the mirror and hate what stares back. Seeing nothing but the flaws and ugliness of nature, they beg the doctor to fix them, to work his magic and make them whole again. I'm not sure if every patient-looking figure here is a real person. Some of these humanoid bodies just look like sacks of ambiguous something. In this next part, we are momentarily transported back into the same long, twisted, and time-absent hallway. Just like any one of us, Mono is in a dream-like state, running in slow motion for the door with the eye on it. He doesn't make it this time either, but he gets a little closer. Six gets him out of this trance once again, and they're back in the living area. You can tell Six is starting to get a little worried about who she's traveling with at this point. Just a side note here too, the music in this area is so strange and distant sounding, like something you'd hear in a liminal space. The X-ray room here in this particular hospital is a neighboring room to a children's area. I thought that was interesting. Toys, small furniture, a tiny wheelchair, and stuffed animals fill this room, and the proximity of this room to the X-ray room is the interesting part. Was this area particularly for children's X-rays? We even see some creepy drawings hung in the background. The Thin Man, one of the soon-to-be-revealed doctor, clothes with no owner, and of course, the mysterious Eye of the Nowhere. A short elevator ride downstairs spits us out into the hospital crematorium. It's useful for the puzzle in the section, but there's even a body in a body bag, just chilling in the room. Definitely not sanitary. And speaking of such, we finally make our way into an operating room. A patient, or part of one, lies motionless on the table with hundreds of prosthetics dangling from the ceiling. Wood, metal, and plastic, they're somehow precise, and one size fits all at the same time. This equipment, by today's standards, does not look new either. Everything is hand cranks and regular light bulbs in this hospital. And before we go on, the stock of prosthetics is not low. We push into the neighboring hallway only to see shelves and shelves and shelves of the same pieces in surplus: feet, hooks, and hands. There's a door we get boosted up through because it's missing its top half. The reason? We find out soon enough, but I love seeing this sort of foreshadowing when coming back through. This room is basically a makeshift operating room, and it's also obviously full of prosthetics. Let's just say from now on, we see fake body parts in just about every room while we're in the hospital from this point. A headless torso lays strapped down to a stainless steel table, an IV bag standing up next to it, and everything seems semi-normal about this until its hand starts wiggling away from its body to chase you under and over forgotten furniture that's in the way. This hand chases us through the vents and between a mixture of operating rooms and tinkerer benches. There's one vise that holds a leg in place at a dirty workshop table, while mere steps away from a dirty operating table. We pass by Six playing with one of the arms on our way back around, possibly breaking fingers on the hand. It's hard to tell. After some coaxing, Six boosts us up into a holding cell with dying lights. As we know, the lack of lighting grants the patients the will to move. But why is this? It's speculated that the patients were once the viewers themselves, and that any source of light is interpreted by their bodies as light shining from a TV screen as it airs the transmission, which would have originally kept them still and pacified before becoming the patients of the hospital. And despite being capable of moving and chasing Mono, the patients do not make any effort to avoid any source of light to prevent themselves from being petrified, leaving suspicion that any consciousness they once had is now gone, and any actions they take is the result of reflexes brought about by basic instincts that remain within their bodies. And we see these quote-unquote finished patients a lot more from now on, littering the hallways like mannequins for now. Some of them seem a little more sensitive to the change in lighting from Mono's flashlight and start to shamble through the patients' quarters. And this is where the hospital really starts to steer toward the insane asylum direction. Layers of cell doors block this section of the hospital, followed by full metal heavy doors to each separate room indicating solitary confinement rooms. Now, historically, solitary confinement rooms were used to isolate highly agitated or violent patients, providing a space with minimal stimulation to calm them down and prevent them from harming themselves or others, often as a last resort when other methods failed. The idea was to temporarily remove them from the source of their agitation by limiting external stimuli until they were stabilized. But with the extensive amount of room options here, I think they were pretty fast and loose with throwing patients into these, especially since they are definitely full to the brim. Multiple sets of arms shoot out of the food doors of these cells. I don't know what their motivation is, but some even burst through the doors and crawl at our protagonist. Then we escape into the communal showers and singular bathtub area. And that is strange within itself. Anyway, this area is absolutely full to the brim too with patients. Maybe this is just the best and easiest place for the doctor to keep them. And like any true asylum, we have the electric chair room. This surrounding is extra demented because of the scribbled doodle hanging in front of the chair, a final image for whoever has the misfortune of ending up strapped down there. With the power restored, we take the elevator even deeper into the depths of the medical prison. Gurneys litter the hallway, as well as full patients stacked up on top of each other, failed patients stuffed into mortuary cabinets. The doctor is definitely in the business of hiding identities. When we get into the doctor's immediate working quarters, we finally get some answers to some of the weirdest adults in Little Nightmares. Masks line the walls of this room, eerie and skin-like. Some just sit in a heap on the desk. None of them look exactly like the adults we've seen so far, but we can see similarities to the chefs for sure, and even Roger, our beloved janitor. The patients begged the doctor to change the way they look because they couldn't bear to be seen for one reason or another. This is a quick and non-invasive fix. When we finally see the doctor, we also see how he has set up his surroundings to assist in his unconventional way of getting around. Openings are only on the ceiling level, like upside-down doorways. Very impractical for someone who doesn't crawl on the ceiling, but perfect for the doctor to rustle through his prosthetics quickly and easily. Something I noticed that's interesting about the doctor is that while he will definitely notice Mono and Six crawling around his work area, he gets distracted very easily and starts obsessing over his lifeless projects laying on the beds you're hiding under. And well, like always, into the vents we go, and while a lot of the doctor's spidey powers seems magical, we see him actually grasping a hold of the ceiling tiles we're walking on when traversing from room to room here. We end up in a trashed autopsy room with hundreds of morgue cabinets all around. The sink is full to the brim with guts, I think. They even have one body bag standing upright, propped in a corner. They certainly have no respect for the dead by the looks of things. And something Mono does here is pretty questionable. After turning off a patient's life support, the doctor rushes in and frantically starts performing life-saving techniques, I think. After turning on the cell doors, an alarm is sounded, and we race through countless shelves of bodies just sitting out in the open air. It's strange. Some of these bodies absolutely look real, and then others are pieced up and maybe only partially organic. Either way, this place is wrecked while the doctor scrambles trying to get to Mono and Six. We are chased and then start to lure the doctor into another crematorium. This one is much bigger, big enough for a certain doctor to easily climb into. Six, always seeming to be cold, takes the opportunity to warm up her little hands and toes. Then, back into the elevator to finally find a way out of this hellhole. We pass through another waiting room. This one is a lot more general hospital equipped. I think this is some kind of multi-purpose hospital, one for regular patients and also for the ones who go insane for either the procedures or the transmission. But back into the rainy streets we go. And it just seems like it keeps getting worse and worse. The heart of the Pale City is a complete mess. Garbage is strewn everywhere, telephone poles slant, and people continuously fall from second and third story buildings completely limp. Once we enter an old dilapidated apartment building, we see our first viewer as he falls violently from the ceiling, crashing through only to run away to capture another glimpse at a nearby TV. He runs with such hunger for the transmission that he crashes headfirst into the TV and falls dead with his head through the screen. And so viewers litter the next hallways, scraping at doors with the odd and happy sounds blasting from the other side. TVs are set up indiscriminately. Wherever there's an outlet, there could be a TV. They do have enough sense to put pots and buckets under the severe leaks though, but there's still a viewer recklessly watching a TV that's precariously perched on the edge of their bathtub. We don't get to see them, but I can only imagine how even more pruny they'd be. After a few rooms, we come to another fissure. Thank goodness the elevator stands strong. Overall, seeing where the viewers live or lived is really interesting. But nothing truly out of the ordinary is going on except the TV-addicted few that linger for the sole reason to use the TVs inside. Hopping between buildings, we get our first glance. The Signal Tower. The tallest and by far the most structurally sound building in all of the city. It looms over the city, watching its inhabitants closely while they do the same exact thing in return. The buildings are actively falling apart while these two make their way through them. Rain is certainly a factor, but the pull of the transmission is the true thing that's happening here. And so, Mono and Six make their way through all this rubble until they get one more chance to enter the transmission and walk that twisted hallway. This time, we open the door. Slowly swinging, it reveals a maybe not so familiar face. We won't spend time on the actual Thin Man character, but when he's around, the slow motion and static effect he has on reality is truly horrific. And once Six is taken from us, Mono has no choice but to find a way to the Signal Tower. Through many feats of parkour, we climb through more apartments, what seems like a massively overstuffed postal office, a small toy shop, and of course a TV repair store where we are chased without mercy by the viewers for destroying their TVs when Mono exits the transmission on the other side. And then when we finally see Six pounding her fists on the screen from the inside of a TV, we are confronted by the Thin Man again, who chases us through wreckage and rooftops. The strange thing is that these rooftops lead to a massive passenger train, just balanced up in the air. Did the transmission do this? Maybe it really does have the ability to teleport random objects into its immediate area. The train lands us at the right stop though. We climb up a manhole ladder and we're spit out right in front of the signal tower. At least on the same street. The lights flicker and bend toward Mono. Even the buildings themselves warp in the presence of him, another sure sign of foreshadowing. And just like in his TV nightmares, Mono battles the Thin Man the same way he bent the hallway he would run down multiple times, same gameplay mechanics at least. The buildings shift and crumble violently with every attack made on the Thin Man, and when the Thin Man finally flakes away, it's almost like Mono gets an expectant look from the tower itself. The streetlights turn to eyes and bend inward to give Mono that knowing look. Until in a strange trick of visuals, Mono straightens out the city and brings the signal tower to his own feet. The massive door opens to reveal a doorway lit by the same magenta glow the signal has. And into the belly of the beast we go. Now, the situation inside the tower is supernatural, to say the least. Our introduction to the tower is the same dream we've been having, the doorway with the eye on it at the end of the twisted hallway. A mesmerizing musical tone plays from nowhere and echoes everywhere. Furniture exists in some places, from armchairs and table lamps to deformed drawers, which are bent and laid out in every corner of the rooms and hallways. There are several doors that act as portals leading to others. Some doors teleport objects to another door in the same area, while others can lead them to entirely new spaces within the tower. Some of the seemingly wooden doors can be found curled up like a gym mat. Long staircases are also seen stretching out from floor to floor inside the tower. Pictures and portraits of deformed faces and creatures appear on the walls. Behind the concrete structure are hidden fleshy blobs that will spread out through the walls as the game nears its end. It's a true nightmare in the flesh, literally. The tower comes alive after saving Six from her monster form, and the fleshy goop rises up and out of the floors and walls, the only discernible feature being, of course, eyes. My theory here is, since eyes are everywhere within the nowhere, perhaps this is the nowhere itself, an omnipresent Lovecraftian god that has absolute rule over this land. It watches Mono specifically the whole chase until, well, we all know what happens. After, Six turns around and walks through a portal, one that looks similar to the TV transmission itself, perhaps just the only way out of this peculiar world. Soon after, I think, we find Mono again at the bottom of this monster. He climbs up the fleshy mounds into a stout wooden chair. The eyes close in on him intensely, and then disappear. There, he grows old, perhaps in real time, perhaps in mere seconds. But I would bet money on him being trapped there for a lot of time because of the music. The music ticks along as if an analog clock, one counting down every single second of growing up in the nowhere. And just like we started, we leave the thin man behind the twisted hallway's door. At the very end, I believe this is well known and the reason why we see Little Nightmares 2 as a prequel to the first game. The static version of Six points the regular Six to a poster lying on the floor, one promoting a space where hunger and gluttony are welcome. The mall. And there we have it, the Pale City, a sprawling labyrinth of flickering static and long-forgotten secrets. From the haunting halls of the hospital to the eerie streets of the city itself, each corner holds a tale of solitude, unraveling sanity, and a desperate search for hope. The Pale City isn't just a location, it's a presence. A living echo that wraps itself around every lonely street lamp and broken television screen. Every step through its foggy alleyways reminds us how easy it is to slip into darkness, drawn by the unrelenting pull of this unsettling realm. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Pale City. If you enjoyed uncovering these dark secrets with me, please like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and once again, we have a revamped Discord if you want to chat lore with the community. It also gives notifications for when I go live or post a new video, wherever. And last but not least, I want to hear from you. What is your favorite part of the Pale City? What was the most mysterious one? What is something that you still don't understand? Leave a comment below and I will comment back. I'll see you next time. Peace.